Imagine a new kind of investing, a potentially life-changing way to invest that honors biblical principles, the kind of principles that you and I grew up with. Since 1994, Timothy Plan has made biblically responsible investing possible, offering mutual funds and ETFs that are filtered for biblical principles. Don't compromise your values. Invest with Timothy Plan. Ask your financial advisor or call Timothy Plan at 1-800-TIM-PLAN. Again, that's 1-800-846-7526 and discover what it means to be a biblically responsible investor. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing. Mutual funds distributed by Timothy Partners Ltd. and ETFs distributed by Foreside Fund Services LLC. As a paid testimonial, there is no guarantee of future performance and each experience will differ.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Fire! Pursuing truth. Torching idols, rebelling against the world. This is the HECKPHIRE Podcast.
Hey there, welcome to the HECKPHIRE Podcast. Glad that you are with us. Happy that all of you who are watching here on the YouTube are watching this way. Those of you that are tuned in via your, whatever service you use, whatever platform you use. Listen, let's talk. I know some of you watched that joint address to the country, specifically the Congress, but it was really more to the country that Donald Trump gave. If you are a paid subscriber, in my after hours today, we're going to dive into that thing. There is something that I think Donald Trump is better at than anybody has ever been in American politics or ever will be. I don't think he's the most gifted politician. I certainly don't think he's the most gifted thinker. I certainly don't think he's the most conservative individual. I don't think he's the best president. I don't think anything like that. But there is one thing that you simply have to admit about Donald Trump. He is better than anyone I have ever seen or ever thought I would see at this one thing. And I'll tell you what it is if you're a paid subscriber and the after hours. So instead of talking about that speech, which I want to do in after hours, the situation with Ukraine. So as many of you know, social media had it and all the news networks ran with it. Volodymyr Zelensky comes to the White House, is there to express his desires for peace, to sign a mineral agreement with the United States, with safety and security assurances and all of that. And I've read a lot of commentators who believe that Zelensky acted inappropriately, who said all the guy had to do was come in, be polite, smile for the cameras, agree, sign the papers, and everything's fine. But instead, he came in, he called Vice President Vance a name, an inappropriate name, got into a bickering, shouting match with the president and vice president, and then it all fell apart. And you saw, if you watched any of the clips, you saw the Ukrainian team, and the one lady was sitting there with her head in her hands because it was all falling apart. There's a couple things that I have to say about this. First of all, you don't normally see that, and I know that. It's not normally played out on the cameras. And I don't know whose decision it was. I don't know if that was planned. I don't know if that was staged. It depends on who you ask. You have pro-Trump people who are going to say Zelensky planned it as an ambush and it blew up in his face because he's not dealing with somebody like Biden anymore. Well, I would simply say if he was dealing with somebody like Biden, it would have never come to that. We would have just continued to send the money over. So you read the pro-Trump people, and it was a Zelensky ambush that backfired. But you read the Democrat side or the neocon side, and neocon simply is a phrase, a label that's used, neoconservative, kind of war hawks type people. They're not really socially conservative in a lot of ways, but when it comes to foreign policy and America's involvement around the world, They want us to invade Iraq. They want us to go here. They want us to go there. That's the neocon stuff. The Bush family, the Cheney family, they've all been tagged as neocons. National Review, the folks over there, they're neocons. Bill Kristol, the Bulwark, they're neocons. They don't really care about conservative social policy. They don't really care about conservative economic policy, but starting wars or being involved in wars and spreading American foreign policy around the world, that's where they are. If you read those sources, they will tell you that this was all a macho head game of Trump and Vance, and that they played right into Putin's hands, and they have disgraced themselves and debased themselves in the United States. It was appalling that we behaved like that, and all of the sophisticated nations of Europe are now having to pick up the slack. So I would have disagreements with both camps. I'm not trying to find the third way here. I don't know how productive it was for all of that to play out on television screens. Maybe there's gamesmanship going on that I don't know about. To me, it looked like guys that have different views on issues, and the cameras were rolling when they kind of, like, to me, it's, I don't know, maybe this makes me really dumb, but it's what I assumed happened between leaders of foreign countries. That kind of stuff, that they bicker with each other and they kind of puff up their chests and, oh, this is what we're going to do. Kind of I thought that was the modus operandi for international diplomacy behind the scenes. You don't see it when they come out before the cameras, everybody's shaking hands and all of that stuff. But you can't tell me when the big three met during World War II that Stalin and Churchill and Roosevelt, or then Attlee when he joined in instead of Churchill, or when Truman went after FDR was gone, you can't tell me that they were always sunshines and butterflies and roses. I guess there's only one sunshine. But you can't tell me that there wasn't some butting of heads. So I guess I don't know. I don't know why it had to become this ground-shaking catastrophe. Now, what has unfolded since then is certainly concerning for a lot of folks. But the thing that I have been interested in, and that I wanted to share with you, because you can get all the political stuff from plenty of channels, but there's a lot of Christians in that part of the world. There's a lot of Christian missionaries in that part of the world. I was fascinated by an interview that was done with an American missionary who is in Ukraine, has been since this Russian invasion happened. By the way, my own 2 cents, you better not trust Putin any further than you could throw him. Look, as far as us letting Ukraine know, we need to be working towards peace here. There needs to be a plan for peace. This idea that Zelensky's talked about the war with Russia going on for years and years and years, I mean, the funds can't keep flowing like they have been. That's not good policy on our part. So we continue to fund, fine, but there have to be assurances that you are willing to accept peace here. Now, losing sight of who the aggressor was and the invader, pretending that Putin is somehow more committed to peace than the people of Ukraine, that's a pretty tough sell for me. And I think it should be for anybody. We're talking about ex-KGB guy here. We're talking about Putin. He's a brutal dictator who does awful stuff. So I think that it's important in our rush to support and defend Donald Trump because he's from our own political party, or he's so much better than Biden, or whatever the case may be. It doesn't mean that we lose our minds and lose sight of and I guess I don't think that J.D. Vance probably has lost sight of it. I don't know where Donald Trump is on a lot of stuff. I don't know what he's going to say, and I don't know what he's going to think. But I think that Vance has a head on his shoulders. And surely he doesn't think that Vladimir Putin is an honest broker. But what's going on in the church in Ukraine? This to me is fascinating. So this guy, Caleb Suko, he's lived in Ukraine with his family since 2007. So he's been there for a long time, spreading the gospel of Christ. Here's what he said initially in the interview. The feeling amongst Ukrainians and in the churches is that we, and he's considering himself now Ukrainian, we have been betrayed by America and by President Trump. Well, I understand that that's how they would feel. Yeah, I get it. I understand. I'm not saying that they have been, but I certainly understand that that's how they would feel. It doesn't surprise me to read that. And then he says this. At the same time, I hear people saying this might be meant to teach Ukrainians that they should not rely on America to save them, but on God. We can see how God is using this to shift affections and hope in things. Now, don't misunderstand. I am not saying that America's position should be to abandon Ukraine so that the Ukrainian people would learn to trust in God. That is not what I'm saying. But I'm saying as a church, the Church of Jesus, you are to praise God, to rely on Him, just like all of us, in all circumstances. And so this circumstance where they thought that they had this direct line to the American treasury and they were going to have all of the resources that they need, that America had their back, and that Russia would not be able to encroach and take over their whole territory, their security, they believed everything was going to be okay because of America. Their circumstance, they believe, has changed. I don't know how much in the end it will have changed. Maybe a lot, maybe not at all. But their awareness of where their security lies. So this got me thinking, what if the shoe was on the other foot? And I know it's difficult for us to imagine the United States being invaded. Like, is Canada going to invade us with its dog sled force and lumberjacks? Probably not. But if America's being invaded, and we were reliant on some ally, it's just so foreign to us, it's difficult to even conceive of it. But where do we place our confidence and our faith and our trust? I think a lot of us have it in our empire. And I think it's almost impossible, not totally impossible, but I think it's very, very difficult for us not to. Suko said that he felt the shift as well. As an American, it was sad for me to see some of what President Trump had done, but it helps to remember my most important citizenship is in heaven. And I think Ukrainian believers are sensing that more now than ever also. Suko says, as far as the general mood of the country, this is somebody that's living there. He says, in general, a war has a wearing down effect on people. They're tired, they're feeling hopelessness, wondering if this is going to be the end. Yeah, if they've lost American support, which many of them believe they have, is this going to be the end? All right, now listen to this. This is a direct quote, I believe. Yes, it is. Because the question was posed to Mr. Suko, how are the churches doing? This blew me away. The way they do the draft over there. Suko says, in the last 6 months, the overwhelming difficulty for all churches in Ukraine is that we're losing our young men. All right, so think about your church now, your local congregation. And each week, fewer and fewer of the dudes are showing up. Fewer and fewer young men are there. Maybe some old men are there, but young men are not. He says they're being drafted, they're away fighting, or they're being injured and killed. Some are fleeing the country illegally because you can't leave the country right now. And then listen to this. The men who are still around are often unable to participate in ministry because they're afraid to leave their home. Why? Because of the Russians? No. Listen, in Ukraine, the draft does not work like it does in America. You don't get a letter in the mail. Instead, recruiters from the military roam around the cities. They set up checkpoints. And if a man about fighting age, which they regard as between 25 and 60, I'll say that again, between 25 and 60, That's fighting age. And if a man of fighting age is spotted, the recruiters go immediately and draft him and send him off. So a lot of guys don't want to go and participate in ministry and go to church and all of that stuff because they know if they're seen, they're going off to fight. Sugo gave an example, said, for example, last year, our worship leader was driving into the mountains for a retreat. He got spotted, stopped along the road, was deemed eligible for military service, and he was forced to leave right then. Left his car by the side of the road. That's how the draft works. I'm running out of time. Like, this is really good to me, but I'll give you a couple of the questions that he was asked. What's it like to be an American missionary in Ukraine? He said it's difficult. Back when the full-scale war started, we knew a terrible evil was coming into our country, and that's been true. Listen to this. Our brothers and sisters in Russian-occupied areas have been tortured or murdered because they were Christians. Some of our supporting churches in the United States are questioning what is really going on in Ukraine. You see, that's the thing. I understand legitimate fears that people have in the United States about, is our money getting to the places it's supposed to go to? And you see some of the nonsense that's gone on with USAID that's been exposed. And you wonder, all of these taxpayer dollars that are being spent in Ukraine, what's it going for? Is it really getting to them? That has a ripple effect, though. When people begin questioning, is my money really going to something I want it to go to? They stop the giving. And when churches are not giving and supporting the churches in Ukraine, then you've got a whole different issue. Suko says, pray for faith and boldness in the Christian men that they'll be able to minister well. Pray for the families of those who have loved ones who are fighting and injured or who have been killed. The pain is really difficult to deal with. That's something else I tend to forget. This isn't an academic exercise. This isn't a philosophical debate for them. Pray that Christians would be able to direct their frustration, anger, and other emotions about this prolonged war in a righteous way. To be able to give those things over to God and not just be angry at Russia and or the United States. And after that, to be able to passionately continue to pursue evangelism and discipleship. I love that, because that's how you change the world. That's how you change the world. Regardless of what military occupies what territory, you change the world through discipleship, which is exactly why Jesus set it up. What's the spiritual temperature over there? That's what I was really curious about. He said there's more stability now in the churches than there was in the last 3 years. In the areas farthest from the front, people have gotten used to living like this. Someone asked me the other day how things were going, and I said, pretty quiet. After I thought about it, I realized there had been a ballistic missile in a hotel downtown and a large kamikaze drone attack earlier this week. And while our kids were riding the bus home from school today, a ballistic missile hit a ship in the port while they were going by. The shockwave moved the bus. But for us, that's pretty quiet. It is important in our debates and discussions about U.S. involvement. And I think that they're legitimate discussions, and I think there's legitimate concern about the expectation that America just fund these wars, these never-ending conflicts. 100% legitimate criticism and question as to what our role should be. But don't forget your brothers and sisters in Christ. Don't forget that there is a kingdom that transcends all earthly kingdoms. Suko said, in general, the war has had a simplifying effect on the church. This I'm jealous of. I know it sounds wild, doesn't it? But he says we aren't worried anymore about bells and whistles, lights and stages. If we have a room with some chairs and maybe a guitar, we don't need anything else. Well, I hope he needs the Bible, but I think that kind of goes without saying. Not that it should, but it does. And it's still meeting every spiritual need. More and more, I'm realizing I can't fit myself wholly under any political banner. The only banner I can fit myself under is the banner of Christ. No country, Ukraine, Russia, or the United States, is the everlasting kingdom. Exactly right. And I'll add on to that, no earthly kingdom is going to be infallible. No earthly kingdom is going to be righteous. There's only one righteous kingdom. There's only one righteous king. And that's the one to whom we belong, and we must pledge unwavering allegiance. Which means, while you take the positions that you take on the war in Ukraine and the American funding and the Donald Trump versus Zelensky scene in the White House, while you're doing all of that, as a believer, your top priority remains praying for the well-being of your brothers and sisters in Ukraine and Russia, but they're not under threat like the ones in Ukraine. Remember where your ultimate citizenship is. Your ultimate citizenship is in heaven, which means you view people as Christ did. You sacrifice for people, you pray for people, you love people as Christ did. And again, I look at this and I think it's just one of the things that you forget when you talk about conflicts, when you're sitting in the United States and you're having these debates about what we should do. You kind of forget that there are people on the ground whose lives have been far more than just interrupted. They've been utterly upended. Again, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not making the case whether American citizens have the responsibility and the obligation to care for them or not. The U.S. can't do it all. The U.S. doesn't have the resources to prop up the underprivileged in every area and defend against oppressive forces that are invading in other places of the world. I'm not making a political argument about what the United States should or shouldn't be doing relative to Ukraine. Do I have my own opinions on it? Yes, I do, but that's not what I'm talking about in this. This right here, this is what every Christian must do. Transcend the political state boundaries and pray for the kingdom as it exists in God's people, the church, here in Ukraine, in Russia, and around the world. Your thoughts welcome, Peter at peterheck.com. That is Peter at peterheck.com. I would love to hear from you and get your take on all of that. But do be in prayer for those folks. If you are a paid subscriber, the one skill that Donald Trump has that dwarfs any other president's ability to do this, any other political leader that I've seen in my lifetime, doesn't come close. This is his one incredible skill. I'll talk about that in After Hours. So those of you that are paid subscribers, I'll see you then. Those of you who are free, hope you have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week for more HECKPHIRE. The HECKPHIRE only burns because of loyal friends and supporters of this ministry. All of these are people and groups that I know personally and trust implicitly. I can't say enough good things about my friend Jonathan at Hartman Family Farms, about my bank, First Farmers Bank and Trust, my lawn care team at Trueland Equipment, my insurance company at Norris Insurance, the place where I buy and lease all of my vehicles, McGonigal GM Buick, and main attraction hair, nobody else touches this head, Stevens Machine, my mechanic at Terrell's Auto Service, my longtime realtor, the Wyman Group, and certainly so much can be said for those fighting for family values in the public square, like the Indiana Family Institute and Indiana Right to Life. Please support them all and thank them.